Hello my beautiful friends, welcome back to Dainty Gifts School of Decor and Decoupage. In today's video I want to show you how to make tiles out of clay. Some of you may say, well, why would I need to make my own tiles if I can just go out and buy some tiles and decoupage those instead? So let me tell you why. It's because you can make tiles in any size that you need. So you can make them this big, you can make them this big, or you can make them this big. This can specifically work for projects like when you want to put some tiles inside of a tray, but you can't find tiles in the right size to fit inside of the tray. So this is where you can make your own tiles to make them fit into your tray. Or of course put them on anything else that you might want to put them on. This is a piece that I made for myself a few months ago, just to kind of test out the techniques and stuff. And when I posted it on my Facebook and Instagram, so many of you said that you wanted to know how to do this and you wanted me to make a tutorial, so here it is. Today is that day. Another perk is that you can make these thinner or thicker depending on what your needs are, and also they tend to be much lighter than actual ceramic tiles. And again, depending on where in the world you are and what kind of shops are available to you, this can also be a cheaper version to buy in ready-made tiles. Disclaimer, these are not the kind of tiles that you would put in your kitchen or bathroom. So these are purely decorative tiles. Don't tile your floor with this, it's going to be too expensive and not strong enough. So today we're going to put these tiles on this canvas board. So this sample piece, I have these tiles on top of just some 6mm MDF plaque. This plaque is from Little Birdie Crafts, by the way, and I don't have any more of these plaques, so I'm going to use canvas instead today. We're going to use this napkin over the tiles. So first I'm going to show you how to make them, and then I'm going to show you how to decorate them and how to actually assemble them and put them on your piece. Without me babbling on for too much longer, let's get into it. Alrighty, so first let me show you how to actually make these tiles themselves. So first thing that you're going to want to do is take your air drying clay. As always, I have my Das air drying clay, and these are actually like the last leftovers that I have of air drying clay. Can you imagine, I actually went into town over the weekend because I needed to go to see the optician, and while I was there I thought, okay, I'm almost out of clay, so I'm gonna go into Works and buy myself some more clay. And I went into Works, completely forgot what I was in there for, had a look around and walked out of the shop and did not buy any more clay. Can you please let me know if you do that too, because I'm over here feeling like really silly right now. Right, so I've got my clay and I'm just kind of softening it up. Got my rolling pin. I'm gonna roll out the clay. Depending on the size of the tiles that you need and the thickness of them, you're probably going to need quite a bit of clay. I would personally recommend to have this kind of sort of thickness, so maybe like 3-4 millimeters thick, you know, throughout. So what you're gonna want to do is kind of keep rolling it out until it's all soft and uniform. You're gonna roll it out to the size of the picture that you're gonna use. I'm only going to show you how to kind of do it on a sample because I don't have a lot of clay, but I've already made my tiles and they're all dry, so I'm not going to make them the exact same size that I did already because I don't have that much clay. So to use this napkin I would need to roll the clay out to at least the size where I can put my napkin on and it's all kind of the same consistency throughout underneath the napkin. But because I don't have that much clay, let's imagine that I'm gonna decoupage this sheet onto my tile. So I'm gonna take my sheet and I'm gonna trace around it with some kind of sharp object. I have my clay tools. So you're gonna want to trace around it. And then you're going to want to take a ruler and measure out the size that you're going to need for 4 tiles. Well, in my case it's 4 tiles. If you need to fill a tray, for example, and you need 6 tiles for it. Basically, you need to make your clay to the size that you're going to need to cover your piece. So in this case it's 13 centimeters here. Do 6.5. I'm going to lightly trace. And then 6.5 here, so this is going to be our middle. Now that I know where the center is, I can just trace it out. Oh, that went a little bit wonky. That's why you always trace it lightly first before you actually make your cut. And then once you're happy with your markings, you take your tool and you make a cut. Try and make it a little bit more even than what I'm doing here. And so you just cut the whole thing out, remove the excess clay, and then when you lift your clay pieces, what you want to do is you want to use your fingers to smooth all of these edges out. If your clay is starting to kind of dry up a little bit, or it's not very easy to get rid of, you know, the uneven bits, you can wet your finger in some water and then rub it along the side, and that gets rid of all of the uneven parts. That really helps. And again, if like me you messed it up a little bit and you've traced it in the wrong place or anything like that, well, then you can just make this be your back side. So you flip it over and this can now be your front side. So you can round off the edges, smooth them out like so with your fingers, make them a little bit neater, and then do the same to all 4 of these. Something to keep in mind is that if you are making something that's going to look very vintage and shabby chic, then you know all of the uneven parts on your tiles are only going to be a bonus for when you start working. They're only going to add to the aging effect. However, if you want to make a project that looks much more kind of modern, neat, put together, then you're going to want to take extra care when doing all of this and make it all nice and neat. I'm just not that type of person. I don't do neat and tidy. I'm just physically not capable of making neat and tidy projects. So everything that I show you or teach you is always going to look a little bit more like, you know, what I make. But if you're into more neater stuff, then there's nothing stopping you from making it much more neater. The basics are still going to stay the same. It's what you decide to then do with the knowledge and the basics that I've given you. So I've rounded off these edges, and then the next thing that you're going to need to do is leave these to dry. The amount of time that this is going to take to dry is completely depending on the type of clay that you're using or the brand of clay that you're using, the climate that you live in, how hot it is, how humid it is, etc. So for me personally, these can take anywhere from 24 to about 36 hours to dry. But that's just how it is for me. I find it helps if you kind of turn them over every so often. You come over and then you flip them over and just let them dry from the other side now a little bit. So that's what you're going to want to do. You're going to want to leave them. So you're going to want to leave them to dry. Now that we've talked about this, I can just go and put these tiles back together. So these are the tiles that I made earlier. These are the tiles, as you can see. They are the right size for this napkin. Again, as you can see, my tiles are very uneven, but it's okay. We're going to even them out a little bit. So as you can see, these ones are a little bit thinner as well. So only about 2-3 millimeters thick. And so the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take some sandpaper, or I have this sanding block here. This is a medium to fine sanding block, so I have a medium side and a fine side here. And you're going to take your sandpaper or sanding block and basically do this. Air drying clay sands really easily, so this is your chance to give your tiles a little bit more shape before we apply napkin onto them. Or rice paper, you could use rice paper on them, or you don't even have to decoupage these at all. You could just do a raised stencil, or you could apply some mold on top of them. That would also look really cool. The only reason why I'm applying the napkin is because I want to show you how I did that piece that you all was asking about. This is going to be a very messy process, so as you can see I'm getting a lot of clay dust. So ideally you want to do something like this in a mask and outside. So now I'm going to go around the whole thing on all 4 of my tiles. I'm only going to do the edges and then kind of like one side, the side that I want to put the napkin onto, because the back side is going to get glued onto something it really does not matter what it looks like. So don't make yourself do any extra work. Alright, so I've sanded off my tiles. Let me give you a little close-up. See, these are the tiles that I have now. This is what they look like. So the edges are a little bit tidier now. So we are now ready to decoupage. So I'm going to lay out my tiles where I want them to go. So you want to sit them quite close together so that you can put on as much of your napkin on as possible and have as little of a gap between them. And then you're going to get your napkin ready. So I'm going to cut off a part of this napkin. And then so I have my plastic file here. For those of you that aren't familiar with the way that I personally like to do napkin decoupage, I use a wet napkin method. And I will show you exactly what I mean by that now. So I have this plastic file here. And I'm also going to need a cloth. So I have a cloth ready. And so I have some water in this cup, and I'm going to pour this water all over my napkin to form a nice big puddle, so that when my napkin is all soaked, and so now I can move it around freely and it doesn't rip. So what I'm going to do now is take a brush, and I'm going to use a very light hand and very gently get all of these air bubbles out from underneath my napkin, while at the same time stretching out any creases in the napkin. I've said this before and I'm going to say it again. The quality of the napkin is definitely going to affect the success rate that you get with this application method, because of course the flimsier the napkin, the easier it's going to rip, and water definitely does not help with ripping. But I personally still think that it's worth it. Alright, so now I've got all of my air bubbles out. I'm going to pick up the plastic file like so. And carefully pour back the excess water into my cup. Then I take my dry cloth and dab the napkin to where it's practically dry. And now I'm simply going to move my tiles so I can comfortably access it all. And so I'm turning the file over, so my napkin is on this side, and I'm turning it over and I'm placing it on top of my tiles. As you can see, until I've taken the plastic off of it, I can still reposition the napkin to where I need it to go. And then again, I'm using this cloth to kind of press it all down, press the napkin down, so that it kind of sticks to the tiles a little bit more. Basically getting any of the air out so that it creates a vacuum kind of environment under there. It always helps if your napkin is a little bit bigger than the surface that you're covering, because then you can use it to your advantage and kind of stick it down onto your table, and it helps when you're removing the plastic sheet off of it. And then I simply roll this plastic sheet off. If I notice that the napkin is starting to lift up, I simply again dab it down as I'm lifting the plastic. So as you can see, no glue at this point. Now we need to separate our tiles. So I'm gonna use my clay tool once again, but you know, a knife will do just fine as well. And so I'm just kind of pressing it in to rip the napkin. So now that I've separated them all, I'm going to pick them up one by one and once again use my cloth to press the napkin down and make sure that it's all kind of stuck on. And now before our water is dry, we're going to seal it in. I'm going to use Polyvine Decorator's Varnish to seal my napkin. You could use whatever varnish that you have, or decoupage glue, whatever you want to seal your napkin. Alright, so once you've sealed your tiles, what you're going to want to do now is leave it to dry. What I'm going to do is get my hairdryer out, put it on cold air setting and get them dry so that I can show you how to apply it as well right now while I have the time. But of course it's always best to let things dry naturally. Right, so now that the tiles are fully dry, we can't obviously just leave them looking scruffy like that. So I'm going to get my sanding block back out and I'm going to sand off the edges off of my napkin and tidy everything up. This is once again your chance to tidy up the edges a little bit if you wanted to. So if you still look at them and think, oh well, they're not looking exactly as like straight or whatever as you wanted them to look like, then this is your chance to do it. And I'm also kind of dragging the sanding block a little bit like so, so kind of going over the horizontal part a little bit, and that creates a nice fine edge. The only thing that you want to make sure is that you use a fine grit sandpaper for this, because if you use something that is very coarse, then of course it's going to rip your napkin off. And so here is our decoupage tiles, all made and ready to be applied onto whatever surface you want to apply them on. If you wanted to, you could also use like a sponge dabber or something like that to go around these edges if you want them to be a specific color. I like the way that they're looking at the moment. I don't want to do anything to them. I might change my mind later, but at the moment I like the way that it's looking. Another thing that I forgot to mention before I applied the napkin on is that if you are using a clay that is a different color, so a terracotta colored clay or anything like that, then you will want to paint it white before you decoupage it with a napkin or a rice paper. The clay that I'm using is already white, so I did not need to do any other prepping to it. And the napkin holds on just fine, so it's completely on, it's not going anywhere. Right, so now let's put it on our canvas. To glue my tiles onto the surface, I'm going to use a ready mixed filler. This is just an all-purpose filler that I bought from my local shop, from the little DIY section, you know, where you can buy paint and paint stripper and things like that. You're going to need quite a bit of it. That's the mistake that I made when I applied these ones, is that I did not put enough filler underneath, so that's why I ended up with like these holes here. So you want to make sure that you apply quite a bit of it. I'm going to apply my filler all over my canvas because I want the texture to be kind of like just like it is on this piece, so that you know how I did it. And we're also going to use a mold, same as here. But if you only wanted your tiles to be here, you know, you don't want that texture, what you can do is you can place your tiles and then mark out a square with a pencil where you exactly where you need your filler to go, and then you don't go anywhere overboard. So I'm gonna take my filler and using a palette knife, I'm gonna start applying it on. I hope that there's enough in here to go around the whole thing. It's a bit dry in places. I've had this thing for way too long now. And it's about the time that I've used it up and got some fresh stuff. You don't have to do as thick of a layer kind of all over the place. Like I'm going to make it a little bit thinner here around the edges. And you want to smear it around in all directions. You know, the more texture you want, the more you need to smear it around and in all different ways. I even got some chunky bits here, you know, from it being, you know, from my filler being a little bit too old. And then we're going to take our tiles. Which way did they go around? This is the important part. We're going to place them on. So I'm going to drag them along like this. Actually, I'm going to place them a little bit higher because we have plenty of space here to add like an extra mold here at the bottom. So I'm going to place them a little bit higher. There's not enough filler here, so I'm going to pick up a little bit from the side, not that hair. We don't need hairs. Using a brush, I'm going to stick some more filler into these gaps here. And then again, I run my finger across and I smooth the surface, just like this. This is going to be a messy business, and it might take some adjusting here and there, like I'm doing now. So basically, you just want to fill in all of these gaps so that your tiles look like they're actually sitting inside there. And then you just go around the whole perimeter like so, also kind of smoothing everything in place. And then all of these bits that we just messed up, we simply take our palette knife once again and we just smooth it over. Okay, I'll go and wash my hands real quick, and then we're going to add some molds on top. Okie dokie, so now let's quickly get these molds sorted. I hope that I'm going to have enough clay for all of this here. Not going to need any glue, so the molds are going to just stick to this. And I think this time I'm going to use this border mold. This is a Sicilian borders mold from Redesign with Prima. So I'm going to quickly make 4 of these borders. I'm going to simply place them all on like this around my tiles. So that they overlap, just like so, and then I'm going to cut them at an angle. Take these excess bits out and stick them together, forming a frame. Once these are dry, it is quite likely that you might end up with little gaps here in these bits in the corners where your clay is going to dry. If that happens, just get some more of this ready mixed filler that you used for the rest of it and just shove it in there and let it dry, and nobody will ever know that you had a gap there. I haven't used this mold yet, so I'm quite tempted to try and see if I can fit it on the bottom here. Oh, this is so hard. This is so hard. It's quite hard getting clay into like larger molds like this, you know, getting it all shoved into it. It's a proper arm workout. Well, I guess since I don't go to the gym, you know, that's the only exercise that I get. Right, let's see first of all if we can get this out. I'll turn it over. It's always easier to get them out if you turn them over like this, because then, you know, you're letting the gravity do all of the hard work. There we go. Ba, ba, ba. Actually, you know what? It fits. I'm just going to press it down and leave it here. And then, just like I did on my other plaque, I'm going to make some of these flowery molds. So this is just the sugar craft mold that I bought on eBay. So I'm going to make 4 little flowers. And stick them into each corner like this. Working on canvas is a little bit different than on a hard MDF surface because it's, you know, a lot more flexible, so it bends a little bit, so you have to just kind of make sure that your tiles are all the way down. And then the last thing that we're going to add is some of these metal micro beads. So any color, because we're going to paint the whole thing anyways. And these are metal micro beads by Little Birdie Craft. in ebony black, and I just sprinkle them on and kind of press them into our paste. We are going to lose some of them when we go to paint, but it's still worth it. And so this is where we are. I'm now going to leave this to dry, so I don't know how long this is going to take, probably about 24 hours, and then we're going to paint this. Okay, my lovelies, so it has been about 36 hours or so since I applied everything on, and everything is now dry, so we are ready to crack on with the rest of the decorating process. So first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to apply some gloss varnish over the tiles, so that when I go to colour the insides of, you know, the filling in between the tiles, I can then wipe away any excess that spills over onto the tiles very easily. So gloss varnish is really good for that. It kind of saves your progress so far on this part, and then you can go ahead and patinate or age or like I said, paint, you know, any of these parts, and it'll be really easy to keep them nice and clean. This is a water-based varnish by a brand called Johnston's here in UK. Any other water-based varnish that you have around will do just fine for this process. I would definitely suggest using gloss if you have gloss. If not, then apply whatever you have, matte or satin. Gloss just tends to have that kind of slidier finish that is, you know, easier to keep clean. Make sure that I've covered all of the areas. I do apologize if you hear me coughing or clearing my throat. I spent the past 2 days painting my kitchen, and that has kind of messed me up. I don't know, I've never had that kind of reaction to wall paint, but this one had quite a strong smell to it, so I feel like it's kind of messed up my throat a little bit, so it's a bit sore now. Anyway, so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to paint the whole thing black, so that when it's all dry, I can then dry brush some white over it and create like a nice aged finish. So I'm going with black first and then white over the top. If you wanted to, you could just leave it white and then dry brush some black over it. It depends on how you want it to look. If you want your darker paint to be on the inside of creases and crevices and white to be on top, like highlights, then you want to apply your dark color first. If you want it to be the other way around, so you want your white to be on the inside of creases and then black to be over the top, then you paint it white first and then add black over the top. What I have here is black gesso. It doesn't really matter what you end up using. Black acrylic paint or black chalk paint will also do just fine. I just personally really like this particular black gesso by Little Birdie Crafts. I think it has a really good pigmentation. It covers everything in literally one go. So I tend to reach for it whenever I need to paint something black. And so while I'm waiting for this gloss varnish to dry, I'm just going to paint around everywhere, and then by the time I've gone around the whole thing, all of this glossy varnish should be dry. Also, of course, you don't have to use black and white colours. You can use whatever colours you want to use. Right then, so I've painted all of the canvas, apart from these little gaps here around the tiles. So now we're going to sort them out. Same gesso, but a smaller brush, and I also have a cloth, and I'm gonna dampen it all. That's gonna help remove any gesso that goes overboard. Really simple. I just take my little brush and stick it in. Apply this paint everywhere, and you're gonna want to work in smaller sections, and then I take this cloth and I simply wipe away any of the spillovers. And at this point you can kind of play around with the amount of excess that you leave. You can kind of smudge it out like this if you want to make kind of more faded edges. Oh my god, my cat is once again trying to break in. He's such a little hooligan. Like, he'll sit there and scratch at the door because he wants to come inside, and then the second that I open the door he runs away from me. So then I have to wait for him to come back, because I know that the second that I close the door again, he's gonna be at it once again because he wants to go outside. And we don't have a cat flap, so the cats rely on us, you know, to be let in and out of the house. So he wants to go outside, but he also likes to be awkward about it. And I know at this stage you're probably looking at this whole thing thinking, oh my god, what is she doing? What is going on here? It looks a mess. Just trust me this one time. It's gonna look okay, alright? It's gonna look good. In the end, it's all going to work out. You just have to trust the process. Just thought of something, and I don't even know why I didn't think of this earlier. I do this with raised stencils, so I don't know why I haven't thought about this before, but you could definitely mix in some acrylic paint into your filler paste before you apply it, and then your filler paste is already going to be the right colour that you need. So you could definitely make it the right colour straight away and not have to mess around with this. So yeah, I only just realised that. Okay, so I filled in all of these bits. Some places here where the filler paste was a little bit lifted, as I was wiping it away, it also wiped away from the top, but I'm absolutely fine with that. If you wanted to, you could again go over these bits with a finer brush and just colour them in. This is what happens to your hands when you do this kind of work. I'm just warning you right now, if you're not somebody who can handle dirty hands, then what are you even doing on my channel? By now you should definitely know that this is just the normal state of my hands or your hands when you do these kind of projects. Right, so before we move on to the next step, I'm going to go over this with a hairdryer, just get everything nice and dry so that we don't smudge any of this black paint when we start dry brushing. Well, here we go, so everything is dry and we're now ready for our kind of last segment of decorating. So we are now going to add our highlights. I'm going to use just this white acrylic paint by Daily Art. I'm going to scoop some out onto my plate, and then I'm gonna use a dry natural bristle brush. So this is a stencil brush. I bought these two from littlecraftybugs.com and they were like under £1 each. You can pick these up quite cheaply, also from kids sections, you know, something that has harder bristles. Pick up a little bit of paint with my brush, then dab it off onto my plate and kind of get rid of most of the paint that was on the brush, just so that it's kind of slightly painty. And then I'm going to start, oh, got a peely there. And then I'm just going to start applying it over the top of everything, just like this. I'm using a pretty light hand, and again it's one of those where whatever sticks, whatever falls off or doesn't get covered with this white paint just stays black or grey. And this is a very great way to show off your texture, whether it be the molds or the filler paste underneath, the texture that we made. I'm using kind of circular motions over the background just because I don't want there to be like any streaks or anything. I hope that you can't hear how nasal I'm getting. Basically, by the minute, my body is starting to go into shutdown mode because it's kind of getting a bit late. So we're going to finish this off and then it's going to be bedtime for me. And I'm also going over the tiles here a little bit just to soften them up. And this is where you can play around with the amount of pressure that you apply, the amount of paint that you pick up, or the amount of parts that you cover or don't cover, and depends on what you think looks best on your piece. As I'm applying this white over this black, I'm realizing that the color looks quite different from, you know, the colors that are here on the tiles. This is a very warm white that we have on there, more like a cream color. So what I should have done really was, instead of using black gesso, I should have used brown, or instead of using this white acrylic paint, I should have added a little bit of either yellow ochre or a little bit of brown to warm it up. And I think we'll do that once I've applied one coat of this over the whole thing, you know, since I've already started. If I stop now and then, you know, use a different tone over the top there, over the top part, it's just going to look a little bit strange. So we're going to go over the whole thing first, and then we'll go over the top once again, but I'm going to warm up the tone. And now I'm going to add a little bit of this yellow ochre paint into my white. Let's see how, oh, Jesus Christ. Let's see how this is going to look. There we go, straight away, instantly, miles better. Something that I wanted to say before I completely forget, I always think about it and then forget to mention things in the video, is I just wanted to say a big thank you to everybody for such a great response to these kind of videos. It's amazing to me that so many of you find this kind of format helpful and interesting, and the fact that I leave all of the mistakes and everything in, so many of you guys appreciate it, and I just wanted to say a really big thank you for all of your guys' feedback. I literally read every single comment that you guys leave. I may not always get the chance to answer to all of the comments. I try my best, but I read them all, and I appreciate every single one of you that leaves a comment for me to read. And I've genuinely been so just, you know, impressed, and not impressed, but I don't know what the word is, just so glad to see so many of you being so honest and appreciative of, you know, me leaving all of the little mishaps when you're on my end of the creative process, and, you know, putting your stuff out there. And especially if you watch other people, you know, who also have like larger followings, and they have so many, you know, views and everything. Even though I don't want to think in that way, it kind of, you know, I'm a human, it still gets to me sometimes, but you see all of their videos and they look perfect and immaculate, and you know, like they never make any mistakes. And then, you know, there's me who's over it, like spilling things everywhere, and making mistakes in there. That you guys find it helpful, and like the fact that I leave it all in, just warms my heart up and makes me really feel like we have a community here, and, you know, we're all here for the same reason, to learn and to lift each other up through our crafts. Anyways, before I start crying, let's get this thing finished. So last thing that I want to do is I want to add a little bit of gold wax, just like I did here. So I'm gonna grab my metallic wax by Finnabar. This is in vintage gold, and I just use my finger to apply it. What I want you guys to remember is that this is a sample piece, so I would have ideally preferred to make this type of project on a wooden board like I did earlier, but I simply do not have one at the moment. So you know, I have to use whatever I have on hand, but ideally you want to apply something like this onto a hard surface. So ceramic, wood, glass, I don't know, anything like that. Something that has a nice sturdy surface. Because canvas is still stretchy and it's a little bit bendy, so you know, so none of this is likely to stay on for a lifetime. Anyways, so here we are. If you wanted to, you could also seal it with varnish, so whichever varnish you like to seal it. You know, gloss, satin, matte, whatever your heart desires. I am probably going to varnish this with a dead flat tomorrow, because to be honest, I just want to get to bed right now. But I just want to kind of talk you through the end. And I'll do a quick sign off now, because the way that I'm feeling right now, I feel like I'm probably not going to want to show my face on camera for the next few days. Anyway, so this is the piece that we created. Is it as good as this one? No, it's not. It probably would have looked better with this particular border. And if I had made the tiles, you know, a little bit straighter, and if I had applied them onto a hard surface, then they wouldn't be sticking out as much here and there in places. Also, if I had more of this filler paste, that would have also made a difference. But it is what it is, regardless of the result that you can see here on this canvas. So whether you like the fact that it's so shabby chic or you don't, my goal was to show you the process of how you create it. And then the end result completely depends on, first of all, what you're working with. So ideally don't do it on canvas, but also how much time you have, how much patience you have on that particular day, etc. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that this was helpful. As always, guys, I will try and link all of the products used for this in the description down below. If you want to follow me on any of the social medias, then make sure to do that. There's also going to be links in the description below. I also wanted to mention that I absolutely love when you guys tag me in your work that may have been inspired by any of my tutorials. So if you are on any of the social medias and you are posting something that may have been inspired, you know, by me, or you simply want me to have a look at it, then make sure to let me know. So either tag me or message me, or, you know, just, I love seeing your guys' work as well. And that is it. I hope that you guys have a wonderful day. I'm sending lots of love from my house to yours, and I'm gonna go to sleep now. Bye.